Great. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have a very exciting webinar lined up for you, highlighting all of the insights that we've gathered over the last year and a half on branding and marketing your plant-based meat company. Before we get started, I want to take the time to reintroduce the GF Ideas India community. We've grown from a handful of stakeholders interested in building out the ecosystem for smart protein to a group of over 1,000 people across science, innovation, business, and policy. The GF Ideas India community is really the backbone of the ecosystem that we're building up in India today. As a member of the GF Ideas India community, I just want to take a minute to highlight a couple of resources that we believe would be invaluable to you as you go on to collaborate and form partnerships within the smart protein ecosystem in India. The GF Ideas India community is now part of our website. We will be relaunching this and sharing more details with you over the next coming months, but you do have access to all of our resources. The first resource I want to highlight for you is GFI India's Entrepreneur Database. This is a database of all the plant-based, cultivated, and fermentation-derived startups in India right now. It's a great tool to reach out to other entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. It's a great tool for anyone within the investment landscape looking at different companies within the landscape in India. It's a great tool for corporates to promote partnerships in the sector. Reach out to us if you'd like us to support in getting connected with anyone within that database. The next tool, which is of biggest importance to all the investors in our ecosystem and the entrepreneurs in our ecosystem, is our investor directory. This directory hosts all investors that are currently analyzing the smart protein space in India and are interested in making investments in the sector. We share access to this resource to any fundraising startup within the Indian landscape. So if you are a startup and you are currently fundraising, please write to us and we'd be happy to share access to this directory with you. The next database I'd want to talk about is the talent database. So if you are a student or if you are a early or mid-career professional that's looking to enter the smart protein ecosystem, I would encourage you to register within our talent database. We frequently share this with startups as well as companies that are looking to hire for their smart protein ventures. Finally, we have the GFI India Smart Protein Ecosystem Database. This database is a comprehensive guide for every single value chain stakeholder within the ecosystem. So right from ingredients providers to equipment manufacturers, IP licensing and regulatory advisors, university groups, food consultants, business consultants, all active within the smart protein sector in India. So if you are a company that you think you should be part of this database, please write to us. We will share the links with you at the end of this webinar. You can write to us or you can apply directly to be part of this database. And if you are a company or a startup that's looking for support across the value chain, definitely access this database and reach out to some of those companies that are already part of that. With that, I will hand over to Hussein, who's part of our consumer team, to introduce our webinar for today. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hosting you.
Chitresh, can you share the screen?
Yeah, can you give me a co-host right, Susan, because I'm not able to start my video or share my screen again.
Yeah, I've just done it, Chitresh. You should have access now.
Thank you. Yes, it's all good now. Thanks. Yes, I hope this is visible to everyone?
Yep, looks good.
Can you press on the next slide?
Sure.
Hello, everyone. I'm Hussain Kuradwala, and I support the Market and Consumer Insights team at GFI India. We conduct quantitative and qualitative consumer research for the alternative protein sector, and we answer questions such as what is the target market for this sector, the habits, behaviors, and attitudes of consumers in this target market, and we provide recommendations on best practices as well as go-to-market strategy. With us today, we have Rajalakshmi, who's our market and consumer insight specialist, and she has over 15 years of experience with stalwart consumer brands such as Unilever, McDonald's, and AC Nielsen, among others. She will help handle the Q&A section after the event, after the main presentation. Our main speaker today is Chitresh Sinha, who is the VP of Innovation at Chlorophyll. He set up Chlorophyll Innovation Consultancy, which has a total collective of 800 global innovators working on brand, societal, and business problems. He's also the founder of the Plated Project, which is an impact brand helping using art to help end hunger. And he's also had experience of over 14 years across various categories and has helped launched over 12 brands from scratch. Today, he will go over the qualitative research that we jointly conducted with Chlorophyll and how that can help with branding and positioning of smart protein products in the sector. Over to you, Chitresh.
Thanks, Dan Hussain, for that. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. And without taking any more time to talk about myself, let's jump straight into what I think everybody's here for. So when GFI and Chlorophyll started this exercise, it was a wicked problem, right? Because it's not about introducing a food variant or a new type of packaged food. It's actually behavior change. And that is the, one of the biggest challenges or wicked problems, as you call them, in design thinking. So when we started this exercise, we followed a design thinking led approach. And in that, thanks to Raji, Varun, and the entire team at GFI, we did a bunch of interesting stuff. So we spent close to 6 months doing this. We did something that we call an innovation dash. So if you're familiar with the Google Sprint model, Chlorophyll has adopted it to create its own version, and we use that to start off the process. We spoke to 12 industry experts from various levels, various types of industries in India. We did qualitative research in 4 cities, which included 40 in-depth interviews. We will show you what the profile was. And we also did something very, very interesting, which was an ethnographic study, but led totally by WhatsApp. Because, if all of you will agree, today, when we cook something that's interesting, whether it's at home, even if it's Maggie, the first thing is that we want to click a picture and share it with at least our immediate family, right? And that's what we capitalized on to ask people about what they were eating, what they were cooking, what was different between a weekday, a weekend, and a lot of insights came just from that. Very quickly going through this in terms of, who we focused on. Because you've got different types of demographics for this category, we decided early on, based on a lot of data that was available, that the early adopters will be people who already consume non-veg and in various forms, but subsets of that. So we actually focused a lot more on that. We did talk to people who are purely vegetarian, or you'll know a lot of these people who eat pure veg food at home, but occasionally we'll step out with friends and have non-veg. We included people like that as well. But largely we focused on the early adopters. In case anybody wants to know, these are all the details. So mix between double income, no kids, working wives, people at home, eat out at least 3 to 4 times a month. That was very, very important, because when it comes to food, when it comes to things which are, new, a lot of the exposure comes in from what you're exposed to at a restaurant or at a mall or when you go out. So we included all of this. Just a little more detail about the various clusters here. So within the early adopters, double income, no kid, the segment, high earning capital, they've got a lot of power to spend that money. They do not have kids at this stage. So, they travel a lot more, they're exposed to a lot more. That group was included. We had nuclear families. So here, if you look at the subset, these were families who were married, they had kids, both of them, or at least one of them, liked cooking, but they had a maid who was involved in the cooking process. This also became very important because it influences, what you cook at home, in terms of if your cook doesn't want to do it or what their problems are. We had another segment called the combo family. These were people who are married, but it's not a joint family, but you've got either a father-in-law, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, somebody from an extended family, group that is living with you. And this interesting cohort, which was non-vegetarian outside. A lot of my friends are like this, that, we will never ever eat or drink at home. But when we step out over the weekend, everybody is eating and drinking. So yeah, that was a fair mix. Okay, I'm going to keep switching between the brand side of things and insights that we've gained from the smart protein sector. And I'm, going to try and use my limited knowledge to give out insights that hopefully will be applicable for a lot of people getting into the sector. So the first thing is that I just want to show you this model that chlorophyll uses, which is, it looks like the DNA strand. It's designed to look like that. To make it very simple to understand, everything in blue is the brand. So all of you here who are working for a brand or want to launch a brand in this category, everything in blue will be you thinking, you speaking. All of the yellow is the consumer. It is the person who you are trying to speak to. Now, usually when it comes to marketing models and, Kotlers and all of the things that we've studied right from our college days, everybody will tell you to go from this diagram from the bottom upwards, which means that first talk about your product and be clear on your product, then talk about how it is different, then layer it with a category differentiator or an emotional need, and then finally how it makes the person feel. You know how soap was sold. So my soap ensures that you don't get pimples. Because you don't get pimples, you have clear skin. Because you have clear skin, you feel really confident. Because you're confident, you'll be more attractive and things like that. Now, chlorophyll actually proposes the exact opposite. And we've used this model for over 300 brands by, now, and it's worked every single time. We actually flip it. So we say that irrespective of early stage, late stage, series A, series B, pre-seed, whatever, titles you want to use, it is super critical to define your brand and the consumer first, and then talk about everything else. So we actually go from the top to the bottom, and you'll see that it's not too difficult because branding is not always logo and packaging and things like that. Brands essentially are the why of what you're doing, right? It's a central idea which drives everything that you're putting out into the world. And that doesn't need a lot of money. That just needs you to be very clear about the fundamentals. So the first thing that GFI and chlorophyll together identified, and you'll see how it comes alive, is start with the brand and not the product. X is just a placeholder for you to visualize this. So, replace X with whatever brand you're working on or you're a part of. Just give me 1 second and check if there's, yeah, not for me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is use this model as a framework or a base for all of the insights in today's session. So let's start with the biggest thing, that matters here is what we call a social context. So think about it today, when it comes to food, and in a country like India, diversity is massive, right? You've got everything from the way that meats or, proteins are cooked. You've got the way that it is consumed, which is different. You've got within a city like Mumbai, for example, various communities, and all of them have subcultures. All of them will have their own processes. How do you define your target audience? Or how do you define your TG? If you start defining your TG based on demographics, which are age between XYZ, earns so much, lives here, the chances are that you will actually realize that you can't take that decision because you're ignoring too many other stakeholders, right? But if you try and cast your net too wide, that itself also is a problem because you don't know how will you really find relevance to that stakeholder. So again, what chlorophyll has been doing and what we propose that people do is use the demographics for media plans, for targeting on Facebook, Instagram, things like that. But when it comes to defining your brand and defining your strategy and communication, focus more on the social context. A social context in simple terms is a worldview that anybody has. So if, it's me and Varun, for example, or Nicole or Hussein, both of us, imagine that everything about us is exactly the same. We live in the same apartment complex, we earn the same amount of money, we've gone to the same schools, but the view that we have about the world, the view that we have about how should you define progress, how should we define relationships, how do you define the success of a business, all of that will be very different, right? And if we can fix on a target group based on this intangible driver, it'll make a lot of those decisions easier. And let me show you how we do that. So coming back to the category, and I'm not going to name any brands. Anything that I say is just, an example. It's not about appreciating a brand or not appreciating a brand. Virat Kohli, for example, right? So he actually has this whole philosophy that everything in my life has happened because I'm vegan, and non-vegetarian is bad and it is XYZ. And when you go vegan, it has a lot of benefits. That's great. It's worked for him, but it cannot become a template. It cannot be that, okay, everybody who loves animals, who wants to do good for the planet, that is the definition of my TG. That again becomes quite generic. So let me show you a commercial.
अरे यार मम्मी ने बटर चिकन बनाया, बटर चिकन जल्दी आजा।
अरे कहाँ जा रहा है?
रोहन के पास नोट्स लेने।
जल्दी आ जाना।
10 मिनट में। आंटी मजा आ गया।
और ले पुत्र तू। आ गया, लंच तैयार है।
लंच?
देख शाही पनीर ट्राई किया है।
शाही पनीर?
ये ले, टेस्ट कर।
ये पनीर तो बटर चिकन जितना मस्त है।
सुहाना के मसालों के साथ खाना बनाइए मजेदार। सुहाना, मजा आ गया।
So the reason why I showed you this without, having any political implications, things like that, is this is India, right? This is us. There are so many subcultures. We're exposed to so much that the way that we view the world, it cannot be unidimensional. So when you talk about meat, and now we are focused only on the early adopters. So these are people who have eaten meat, do eat meat. The frequency of consumption and how passionate you're about meat may be different. But if you've had exposure to meat from early days in your life, it is celebratory. All of us, irrespective of income levels, socially conditioned to treat meat as a celebratory thing in India. It holds true for every single person. Now, if you see this painting or, the artwork there, what she's making is, I'm a North Indian, so it's gujiyas that usually we make during Holi. But when something like this used to happen, the whole family used to come together. It wasn't about just the half an hour where you eat food. It was about everything that goes into it from the day before, from the morning of the day that this is made. And it holds true for meat. Most middle-class Indians would have consumed meat in the 80s or the 90s when, most of us would be growing up, once or twice a week. And especially on the weekends, it used to be that there'll be a special dish that, mom will make only once a week, only when guests are coming. And the excitement will build up right from the morning. Now, when you look at celebration, it's not just celebration, right? What is the definition of celebration? So non-vegetarian is equal to celebration, but within celebration, there's a strong sense of nostalgia. So with double income, no kids, a lot of this audience actually told us that after we got married and we moved away, we actually want to make things the way that our parents used to make us, just because of that feel good, vibe that comes in of doing that. rituals. So it's not just eating, but Sunday morning, if you wake up at 9 a.m. and you smell something, in your mind, you immediately know that, oh, wow, today is the day that biryani gets made. Indulgence, everybody in the family, when meat is made and it's a special occasion, will overeat. And it's always a celebration that maza aa gaya, bilkul jagah nahi bachi pet mein. Parties, if you're going out, if you're calling people home, and if you're having a glass of wine or whiskey, usually in your mind, the starters will always be non-vegetarian, usually. And social currency, this is huge. This is very, very big. And a lot of people have been telling us that plant-based meats or smart proteins actually have become a symbol of social currency now, because now it's me serving something that people are not exposed to, and me setting the tone of the conversation. But all of these are sub-elements of celebration. Now, if you take that thought forward, and if you look at the 4 or 5 clusters that we had, for each of them, let's look at it column-wise. When it comes to food relatability, double income, no kids are people who are in between about, say, 25 to 35 today. It's an in-transition generation, right? We hold on to some elements of our past. There's a lot of the future that's being thrown at us. When it comes to cooking, most of this audience relies on the cook or the maid. And we call them the Sherpa, because you will tell them to chop things up, you will tell them to do all of the basic work, and then you come in and put in your touch of actually putting together pasta or putting together the biryani. Usually cooking now has become a shared bonding experience. So there's no longer male female. It's about picking something that's an experience, challenging yourself, having a glass of wine, having a great Spotify playlist playing, and then cooking together. Different cues for different types of families. So for nuclear families, food is actually now self-definition. I have a 3-year-old, 4-year-old now. When you have somebody in that age group and you're living on your own, the children actually drive the bus when it comes to what decisions you take in terms of food. So nutrition, even ramifications for the future. Maybe I was not exposed to beef and pork when I was growing up. Do I want my child to be exposed to it? Because they are going to go and study abroad, for example. So all of these decisions come into your mind, and you will change a lot of your life when kids come in. The other big thing is when children start driving the bus, and this is kids right from about 5 years old till about 15, even 18, they'll see a lot of stuff on Instagram, and they will come back and tell mom, or they will tell the maid at home that ye recipe dekho na, aaj ye banao. I'm sure all of you know people who will send a YouTube video. If you've seen that guy who does that, kaise ho mere chatoro. My mom keeps sending me his videos, and then I will forward it to my cook, and she will make it just by watching it. So it's more replication than creation. And there is a sense of exploration now on a daily basis. So food has become the sense of discovery, especially during the lockdown period for a lot of us, right? Joint families, self-worth, and this is not, a traditional thing. It holds true even today. For usually it's a woman of the house who's holding the entire family together. For her, when she makes something, or she gets something made, and the entire family comes together and enjoys it and celebrates and actually looks up to her, even if nobody says that bahut acha bana hai, she knows that I'm the one who's the glue keeping this family together, and my self-worth is somewhere or the other in a country like India linked to food. One more here: veg at home, non-veg outside. This is pure gratification. So this is purely about, I'm going to keep parents happy, and I'm going to keep myself also happy, and this is the balance I've found. Cooking for them is genuinely a compromise. That 5 days a week, eat what is there at home. 2 days a week, I will eat whatever I want. Now, if you layer that, what is the role that non-veg? And if you understand that, then we can actually take that forward into understanding what role smart proteins will play for them. For the double income, no kids group, it's an exercise in exploration. For the nuclear family, it's self-expression. For the joint family, it's appeasement. For the veg at home, non-veg outside, it's self-gratification. Now, this might seem very, very subtle, but this is the social context. So if you're thinking about what do I want to put out there into the world, rather than saying that, okay, I'll price it at 500 rupees for a 250 grams packet and XYZ, actually step back and think about is this something that will help people explore? Is it something that will help people use the product in multiple ways for self-expression? Is it something that is purely about given to your cravings minus all of the calories, or whatever you want to think, but it is an appeasement exercise? Or it is about something that you want to do for yourself? I'm jumping the gun, but usually making breakfast, making a snack, the 4 p.m. thing, all of this is done usually for your own self. So then self-gratification comes in. So long story short, the first thing to do is start off with what you believe the person's mindset is. Understand that most Indians are looking at meat. We are all aware about cruelty. We are all aware about all of those things. And for a lot of people, that's a driving force. But for a lot of others, it might actually be a cohort of things. So when we've spoken to people about paying a premium for, sustainability, when it comes to electric vehicles, for example, most of the research has clearly pointed out that people will not pay a premium for it. But once they buy a vehicle like a Tesla because it was just so good looking, the thing that they will talk about is sustainability. So it's a rationalization that happens. So how do you actually not get drawn purely into the rationalization part of it and look at what is driving people's decisions in their life? Going ahead, and please keep typing out questions if you have, or even if you don't agree or it's not making sense in the chat window, Raji and I can take this up immediately after this. But if this made sense to you, if you said that, okay, let me look at people beyond demographics, let me define a mindset that I really want to cater to, then the big question is that what are the expectations from the category that we need to redefine? And remember, the category for most people is not smart proteins. That's a product that they're buying. But the category in their mind is, okay, I'm used to buying non-veg. Today, I want to do something that is exploratory, but it has to be in this non-veg zone. Now, what is it that I'm getting here? So this is something that you'll see a lot of, that if you just Google it or talk about it, that the whole idea of a blind taste test. So what does a blind taste test do? I mean, taste, let me put it out there, is super critical. When you're introducing plant-based meats or smart proteins, alternative proteins, super critical to get taste right. That is 101. But it cannot rest only on taste. So when you do a blind test, what are you essentially doing? You're blindfolding a person. You may even, turn off other senses, and you're actually telling them that just eat this and tell me exactly what comes to your mind when it is in your mouth. The problem with that is that taste genuinely is an illusion, because what we usually think about as taste is the sense of taste, which is related to your mouth and the tongue, right? But there are 5 senses at play when it comes to food. Let me do this exercise, and here it would be great if somebody can actually type out in the chat window. When you saw this image, did you feel those tiny drops of Coke flying out, and did you actually feel that? Did you have a sensory reaction to this image? Okay, great. My test did not fall flat on its face. So Nicole, Prateek, all these people have said, yes, this is something called synesthesia. So what it means is that one of your senses is actually triggering another sense. So the sense of taste gets triggered by the sense of smell. The sense of sight triggers a sense of touch. Whenever this happens, this is called synesthesia. If you've seen all of the Zomato ads, which are the YouTube pre-roll ads, they are ASMR ads, which are based on this science. That can I trigger a physical or a sensory reaction in people when it comes to food by triggering senses. Now, if we know this, then why does it happen that most of us will obsess over only one definition of taste? Like this, I love this, it's very, very old, but if you are like me, mid-30s, do you smell what the Rock is cooking, right? And then biryani, you smell biryani even before you enter the house, and that smell triggers a sense of taste. When you see the biryani ka, dhakkan open. I love non-veg, so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is, personal biases. But if you actually have dum biryani and you take out the atta from the side and you open the dhakkan and you see all of those burned onions, caramelized onions, you can taste it. And that is what taste essentially is. Now, what happens in the West, because usually, that's where a lot of our learnings come from, is when it's a steak that you're eating, it's usually the sense of meat. It's a taste of actual meat. But in a country like India, it's not ever usually. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most of our food that we consume, you actually will never really taste the meat. You're tasting the spices, the coating, all of it. Let me do a fun test again. The dish on the left, mutton nalli nihari. What is the best part about eating nalli nihari? What's the experience? What is it that, anybody who loves mutton and has eaten nalli nihari loves doing? The marrow, exactly. And it's not eating the marrow. It's that whole idea of holding it in your hand and going tuck, 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 and then one tiny drop falls out. But that is the experience, right? Sucking on the bone marrow. Now, I'm sorry to all the vegetarians on the group here because it might turn you off, but that is what it is. Now, imagine if you took away that experience and somebody said, we've redefined nalli nihari, where the taste is exactly nalli nihari's taste, but there is no nalli in it. You wouldn't be able to do it, right? On the right, I love street food, and I love, the cheap Chinese you get on the streets. Now there, when you eat this crispy chicken lollipop, how much of it is actually meat and how much of it is corn flour and starch and, all of the Szechuan thing that is dipped into it. But for me, that is the taste of chicken lollipop. So what I'm trying to tell you here, and the research, what it threw up is, it's very, very important. We take it for granted that taste is king. There is no going away from that. But the taste kingdom has more than just one sense of taste. So smell, the juicy mouthful of the first bite, the color, sucking on the bones. Somebody typed out in the chat window that we need plant-based bones. Yes, I would love it. We will cover a bit of that in a bit, but even things like a layer of oil floating on top, we are not going in and essentially delivering to people that here is the exact raw meat that you should use for XYZ. What people want to buy is the final taste of the dish, correct? And that gives us a huge opportunity because of the diversity that exists and because of so many mindsets that exist. It's a massive opportunity for us to actually not look at smart proteins as alternatives at all, to actually say that there's something more that we are offering to you that you can add to a palate. Now, going ahead with it, the research actually pointed this out, that if you talk about plant-based meat, and when we spoke to people about it, the first thing they obviously said, taste kaisa hoga? Will it taste like chicken, or will it taste like mutton, or will it taste like prawn? Even if you say yes, because we've been exposed to something for generations, and now this is something fairly new that is coming in, human biases are always going to say that this is too good to be true. It can't ever replace something. It can't ever taste exactly that. So if you ever focus exclusively on taste, it's a tough battle. People will get into things like, oh, but where are the bones? You're saying that it is made in the lab, so I'm sure it is processed and artificial. It looks exactly like it. It won't have, it's not fresh, so I'm sure it has high preservative. All of this is possibilities. All of this is the magic of smart proteins. However, if you choose the wrong starting point to tell a story, you will spend a lot of time on just justifying things. And it then will translate into the packaging, and it will translate into the communication. So if you choose a very different off the diagonal starting point, then taste, all of these things become characters in your story rather than just the hero of your story. Here's something else that I wanted to show you guys, and we do this a lot at Chlorophyll. So take any product or experience, map it onto the 5 senses. And then you'll have a winner on your hands if you can, in the category, identify which are the senses that all other guys are playing at, and which are the senses that nobody's really focused on. And can your product or service or marketing amplify the ignored senses? So in the, and this, we've not invented it. This is, you can actually see this on TED Talks. Look at the PlayStation game consoles or any game consoles. Before the Wii came along, gaming and, Halo, God of War, any of these, that if you played these games, sense of sight is extremely high in all video games, right? The graphics are spectacular. The second big sense that all game controllers and games focus on is a sense of sound. Guns, the music score, you've got, famous people coming in and doing voiceovers now. But because it is an experience where there's no sense of taste, that is zero, right? Touch. Before the Wii came along, PlayStation controllers had haptic feedback. So the maximum that would happen is when you shoot at somebody, it would vibrate a bit, right? So what Nintendo did actually said that sight and sound we will keep intact, but the sense of touch is what we will amplify unlike anything else. And they actually gave you a controller which you hold in your hand and you actually move it. So you'll play tennis with the controller like it's a real racket. You'll play cricket, you'll go bowling. And that differentiated the brand and gave them a right to play in a category which was quite competitive, and you really had very little room for new players to come in. So can you do that with plant-based meats? Because you're reinventing things, right? You're creating the future. So rather than saying, let me replicate 1, 2, 3, can I replicate certain things and then introduce 2 or 3 things that people want, but they actually don't get or they're not able to perfect? The other big learning here from the category is that, and I'm going back to the West and India, in India, non-vegetarian food or smart proteins will always be part of the meal as compared to the meal. So, even if the maximum, like most people will have meat by itself as a dish would be, say, a fillet of fish, or you'll order, roast chicken or things like that. But even with that, as Indians, we want veggies on the side. We want mashed potatoes. We'll ask for poi. I grew up in Goa. Or you'll ask for, garlic bread or things like that. Or this is what a thali looks like, right? It's great because Indian culture has always got the balance between carbs and proteins and all of that. But if you actually know this, then you know that what's going to happen is the smart proteins that we introduce need to work well with the other things that are consumed along with it. A lot of times we obsess over putting the perfect product out there and we forget the details that this product will be consumed in context. And if you can get the context right, and if you fix the problems that exist there, it's a huge opportunity. This, again, big learning for us. I mean, it's always there at the back of my mind, but when Raji and we did this research, Indians actually use this term, right? If somebody asks me that, are you vegetarian or non-vegetarian? Usually I'll say I'm a pure non-vegetarian. It sounds cool, but it's actually garbage. There's nothing called pure non-vegetarian. I am a vegetarian like most other Indians who eat meat, who also eat meat. If you look at the data, the amount of meat that an average Indian consumes per month, per week, on a daily basis it's nothing compared to what other countries in the West are consuming. And that's because most of us who love meat and have it, all 3 meals in a day at times, it'll always be part of a meal. So the quantity that we're consuming will always be very, very small. And we'll always have it with things around it. Now, this changes a lot of things when you think about putting the dish out there or putting the perfect thing out there. Okay, I'm going to assume you're all with me. Nobody's fallen asleep. Everybody's thinking I'm making sense and not thinking I'm a madman. So you've got social context. You've got the category now. We figured out what can we redefine in the category. How can it be dramatically different? What's the mindset? I'm focused on all of the consumer circles because this is about the consumer study. The blue circles is what I'm hoping you guys fill in, or we can all work together to fill it in. But that's the reason I'm ignoring the blue circles right now. Now, if you know that there are certain category expectations that we want to redefine, how will your brand actually engage with somebody, and what is the response that you want from that person? Usually, brands do this. That what's the response you want from a person when you're introducing any kind of smart protein? The first thing is pick something which is good for you, good for your body, and good for the planet. So it's cruelty free, it's antibiotic free, it is, many other things which are there. Now, like I said earlier, this is rationalization. And if you go down the rational route as the starting point, this is all important. Don't think that I'm saying that's not important. But I'm saying if this becomes the only thing that we talk about, then there are a lot of alternatives that already exist. So when we did our research, we asked people that, what's your problem with chicken today? And a lot of them said that, oh, chickens now, they're all antibiotic fed. I'm so scared about what can happen there and things like that. And the minute we said that, wow, that's a great thing that you've just told us. What if we told you that there's smart proteins which taste like chicken, look like chicken, everything like chicken, but totally antibiotic free? You would expect that person to jump at this, right? Because they've just said that I want chicken without antibiotics, but they didn't. As soon as you tell them that, their first instinctive reaction is, but I can get chicken which is antibiotic free. There are a lot of companies now like Delicious, etc., which are actually promising you this. So instead of now getting another loop of saying, oh, but it still has these other problems and things like that, can we actually change the conversation? So if you look at this painting, imagine there's all of these people at a gathering. GFI is invited various founders to sit at the table, and you've got a 28-year-old couple, you've got 35-year-old working mothers, you've got a 50-year-old housewife, all of this. Sorry, there's a question here. So 4 cities, the sample size, we will cover it at the end of this conversation, but it is substantial. So, rest assured about that. So imagine all of these people, all of them are in the cohort and the social context that you want to appeal to. But all of their responses will be very different. They're all seeking different cues, right? So what do we do? Now, this is where we go back to the starting point. So if you remember this, exploration, self-expression, appeasement, gratification, this is the point where you connect the tangible with the intangible. So imagine you're doing something which is, going to be something very dramatically different from what people have ever seen. So what does that mean? So right now, all the alternatives that I see in the market, and I've been trying a lot of them, is you've got Shakahari's, keema samosas, right? Great. I love them, use a lot of them. However, it's something as a product I've already been exposed to. But it is now saying that instead of, mutton, this has got soy or whatever else is there. It's not something dramatically different. Now, if somebody comes in and says that here's something which is dramatically different, you've never eaten something like this, that for me would be exploratory. So suppose I'm in that zone. At a cue level, what tangible cues should I actually give this person? Now, these are all of the problems that people mention to us, and you can find this out yourself also if needed. But a lot of people, especially double income, no kid, the younger segment said this, that while I love red meat, there are 2 problems. One, it affects cholesterol. So, fatty liver, things like that happen. It also is, bad for weight gain. Other people who are older actually said this, that, while I was younger, I would eat 1 full chicken on my own. But today, if I eat more than 4 pieces, I get indigestion or, I get acidity. Parents of young kids actually said that while they want their kid to have a lot of protein, when it comes to even basic protein like chicken, they are worried about the antibiotics that, will it affect them as they grow up? Red meat. Now, this I was surprised by, but a lot of people actually said, and it's true, maybe, but a lot of people strongly believe that if you eat a lot of red meat, it increases aggression. So they're like, oh, we don't want to give a lot of red meat to our kids because of this. Now, imagine if you just create multiple combinations of these, permutations and combinations, where you pick up 1 or 2 of these and you go back to, this. So if it is exploration, you say that here's something that will make your Sunday afternoon meal unlike anything else that you've done in the last 4 weeks. And while you do that, it will also solve these problems, one or two of them. And then you keep going back and forth in terms of building your proposition from that point onwards. So the cue that you're giving this person is exploration without any calories, self-exploration that brings the family together and nobody worries about any one or two of these. Or, for the nuclear family, where the one with the kids. Yeah. So keep your child happy without worrying about anything like this, even if it's, self-aggression or whatever it will say. So the point we're making here is, while you started off with intangible ideas, you focused on a social context, you identified category cues and you said, how can I put them on a diagonal and then go a little off the diagonal? When you go into giving people cues, it cannot be vague and arbitrary, right? That's where you have to mix the intangible with tangible problems that they have from meat, or tangible things that they're seeking, from meat. So we've not covered a lot of it here. The report's going to be out soon and you'll have access to it. But mutton, when it came to red meat, a lot of the younger population actually told us that we do not know how to go and buy mutton. Because earlier dads used to do it and they would go and say, agla das do, and you need a smaller thing and not a larger animal, whatever, a lot of science to it, right? When they go in and they buy it from a cold storage place, they don't know if mutton's fresh or not. Two, if somebody has the guts to actually go into a market and go to the place where you're getting fresh mutton, a lot of people have come back saying it turned me off so badly because it was unhygienic, it smelled. I was more worried about eating it now than I was all my life. Now, can I take away some of those problems while delivering on these? It can't be either or. That's what we're saying. And how does it affect communication? So this is a live example. This is a screenshot from the Mumbai Marathon. We've been working with them for the last 10 years. About 12 years back, 14 years back, when the Mumbai Marathon started, the promoters were in a conversation with, the title sponsor at that point in time. And the title sponsor and the ad agency which was working with them came in and said that you need a unidimensional message to be communicated to people about why they should take part in a marathon. And the message at that point of time was health, that you need to run because it's good for your health. And now come in, run and be healthy at India's first marathon. And, the promoters fought tooth and nail, and it was a great foresight on their part, where they said that it'll never ever work if you give people just one reason to try a new category. You need a cohort of reasons and you need to mix those reasons up and give all of those multidimensional messages to people when you're introducing a new category. Because nobody is ever going to run just for one reason. Today, we've actually discovered this and we've gone and done large amounts of research with full marathoners, which is people who run the full distance, and they are in it purely for the sport, right? It is pure running, adrenaline, winning, timing. Even those people tell you that I can run on my own. I can take part in any marathon in the world, but I come in and take part in the Mumbai Marathon because for me, beyond running, it's the largest showcase of people pushing boundaries of the human spirit and not the physical spirit. And that's what attracted me to this particular property or event or sport. Now imagine doing that for your own category of product. You've got multiple people, a lot of them offering similar products. How do you differentiate? You differentiate by not giving out a unidimensional message, owning a very clear message which has many layers to it, targeting it at people, defined not by demographics, but by a mindset, and reinventing the category cues. That's what we've done so far. Lastly, if this made sense so far, finally you get into the product level detailing, right? So what will the person evaluate your product by? This is where rubber meets road. Now, we call it the golden ratio, but if you are familiar with the golden ratio, the Mona Lisa was painted with it, but today the golden ratio is used in everything from food plating to photography to art to everything under the sun. Now, these are the parameters, and this is now validated with a lot of research. the parameters based on which people will evaluate a product, which is a smart protein offering. Ease of access, ease of cooking, what's the health profile, what's the taste, what's the versatility of it, and social currency. All of this is at a product level. Now, this gives you enough room to play again on creating different combinations and creating something totally new. So what does ease of access mean? The mutton story that I just told you, that is ease of access. Prawns, getting good prawns, which are cleaned, which are, deep veined. You don't have to worry about farmed or sea fresh. You don't have to worry if, electricity had gone in for 8 hours and if it's going to be okay or not to eat. All of that is ease of access. Ease of cooking, this is massive and it's not explored enough. But things like mutton, the biggest problem with mutton is that you will always end up overcooking it if you're not used to cooking mutton. And overcooked mutton becomes chewy, rubbery. Same with prawns. If you actually want to stir fry prawns, you got to do it for very little time compared to, stir frying chicken. Or biryani, when the chicken in the biryani is taken and tasted, it has to be juicy. It can't be overcooked. It can't be rubbery. Now imagine the pressure on somebody who's cooking this and who's not experienced. What if I suddenly came in and gave you the perfect mutton chunks for biryani? They will be juicy. They will disintegrate the way that they're supposed to. They have added smell and you never ever have to worry about overcooking them. Now you could have got the same product and actually spoken a lot more about the nutrient profile. You could have spoken a lot more about, cold storage or things like that. But this is a choice that you can make if you identify the right things that people are looking for. And you have all of this at your disposal. The other thing, which is a huge learning for us from this research exercise, was this chart alone can give you great product ideas. So imagine this grid. When are you eating non-veg, or when are you going to eat a new smart protein alternative? So the day of the week, the time of the day, it dramatically changes things. So breakfast on a weekday is very different from breakfast on a weekend. What I eat in meats on a Saturday, Sunday is very different from what I eat in meats on a weekday. What I eat on a Sunday afternoon will be very different from what I eat on a weekday afternoon. If you actually tap into all of this and follow a user journey from there, you can actually start creating so many different requirements to build your product or your marketing or your brand messaging on. So just play along with me and see how this goes. Okay, now let's look at one of these. Let's pick weekend. Let's pick afternoon. So what is somebody eating on a weekend afternoon? It depends on who, right? If I'm eating alone on a weekend afternoon, chances are Netflix is on. I'm going to be sitting there with a glass of beer and I'm going to eat straight away from the takeaway that I've ordered from Swiggy. There's no way I'm cooking. But I know that I've got to go out again in the night. So I want tasty non-vegetarian food that doesn't make you feel really full in the evening. Hypothetically, imagine if that's happening. Now imagine if it's a gathering of family members. So if it's family members, and I know there are different age profiles and I'm from a North Indian family, I know that kuch na kuch Indian banana hai and traditional so that everybody eats. But if it was my friends coming over, then I know that all of us are going to be, eating and walking around and we're going to be having drinks with our meal. So then we need something that's actually going to work for everybody. We don't want something too heavy. We want a lot more starters and less main course, right? It changes everything about what you're eating and how. Now, what's the mood that somebody is in? What's the occasion? Based on that, the meats usually get picked. Now, based on the meats, the way that you cook them will be very different. And what's the place of consumption? If you actually just pick up any one or two of these or multiple combinations of these, it'll straight away tell you about what is it that people seek from that occasion and from the meat item or from the smart protein item for that period or for that time. And that can give you a lot of thought starters and ideas. Now I'll show you how. So, during purchase storage, this is mutton again, takes a longer time to cook, more roasting, the better. Keema is tricky to cook, needs to be roasted. People actually told us this. We are not making it up. Now, during consumption, if you're making mutton, it has to be a deep red color of the curry. Usually, a layer of oil on top is, great. Spicy, bland mutton. There are a lot of ingredients which different communities use. There is a lot of mutton that's tasty and bland, but usually no. Even a little of the mutton is extremely filling. So your stomach's full, but your heart's not full. Now, what if you could actually take all of this and fix things here and say that, the celebratory dish that will bring the family together and lets everybody eat to their heart's content without any guilt. Look at this chart here. So here's one of the last takeaways from this session that I want to share with you, that rather than a meat replacement, can you actually create totally new opportunities that didn't exist? I just want to turn the lights on. So we can lunch the experimental side dish along with meat that is bound to be the hero of what you're serving. Festivals. Now, during festivals, you want to cook great food, but without chicken, mutton, it becomes that, oh, kya serve kare? But, it's something new that can be offered here. Now, weekend breakfast, a ready range of ready to cook mock meat options, which have zero guilt, which are great for kids, which, you can serve in different ways so that your child actually has a healthy, full breakfast. There are multiple things that you can create just with this grid here. Now, before we get into Q&A, I don't know how much time we have. We're good on time, I think. Yeah. I'm just going to sum things up. If we have to give you anything to take away after the research exercise and with the chlorophyll experience, number one, start with the brand and not the product, even though it's a new category led by the product. Two, you will have to create for vegetarians who eat meat. Three, Indians, especially the early adopters who already consume non-veg meat, will always see meat as something which is celebratory. So if you go in and actually, have the entire conversation only about the bad aspects of meat, it's a tricky balance. So, explore all aspects of it and look to add and not replace. Taste, like we said, aim for the multi-sensory experience. Create for occasions and dishes. And, don't try and replicate raw meat or exactly what the raw ingredient is meant to look like or feel like. Aim for a cohort of benefits and not just one single unidimensional proposition. This does not mean that you do not have a clearly defined ownable territory or differentiator. You will need that compared to other brands. But when your messaging is going out, and I can share this with you if you've seen the latest Burger King ads, they engage a lot of things that people will be worried about when it comes to plant-based meats. And they have fun while doing it, but that's what we need to do, that cover different aspects at early stages of building the category. Lastly, amplify in meat what real meat can't. And if you combine that with, not replacing meat or not trying to replicate it, that gives you huge, licenses to play. So if you've got, like somebody had this idea, right? How can I have bones that you can actually chew and eat? It's amazing. I mean, I would love it. And it's got that crunch. It actually gives you that whole thing of, rice and soft meat and everything is soggy. There's this crunchy thing and I can actually eat it. Imagine doing something like that. Prawns that you can never overcook. Prawns that you don't have to worry about if you've left them out of the fridge. The perfect chicken for XYZ. You know what Ching's did, right? What did Ching's do? Ching's identified that Indians love Chinese food, and that is Desi Chinese. And they perfected everything for Desi Chinese. Can we do things like that? Lastly, having said all of this, there is no going away from the fundamentals of the category building, which is taste, price, access. However, these are things when a lot of people come together, and Varun and the GFI team, they're already creating a massive platform, right? With 1,000 people on this community. This will happen. The opportunity for entrepreneurs and for people who are creating brands is actually at this stage. And just a side story from this, Sunday hoya Monday, Rose khao Ande, that was a line that one of the co-founders of Chlorophyll actually had done and come up with. Anand Halve and Kiran Khalap were co-founders of Chlorophyll. Andy sadly passed away a few years back, but he's the one who did all of the research at that point of time to introduce eggs as, a behavior change or a dietary ingredient in the minds of India. And he used to always tell us this, that people obviously will need to know why eggs are good and things like that, but you need to create triggers for habit change. And that's why this whole idea came about, that Sunday hoya Monday, Rose khao Ande. The biggest thing to break at that time was ki anda hum log khali ek din pe khayenge, or it's supposed to be had it only this time. Yeah, that's everything from my side. If you want to talk about this slide, Hussein or Nicole, and then we can get into the Q&A.
Yeah. Thanks for the wonderful session, Chitresh. We will start the Q&A section in a bit. But before that, for those of you who want a deeper dive into some of the topics we talked about today, we have some resources from the Insights team that we will be publishing in the next month. Firstly, our deck with chlorophyll will be available on our website. It will be comprehensive and go much more into detail than what has already been talked so well about by Chitresh today. And secondly, we'll also be publishing a white paper on the quantitative research we have done on usage, habits, and attitudes of the early adopters for plant-based meat in India. And lastly, we have go-to-market strategy guides for plant-based chicken, mutton, and fish for entrepreneurs who are looking for insights into very specific product types. So I'll now hand over to Raji for the Q&A section.
Can I stop sharing my screen, or do you want me to keep that open?
Sure, Chitresh, I think you can stop sharing that. We can take the questions. Okay, so the first question is, yes, somebody wrote, yesterday I saw a PBM brand having a tagline, have meat without feeling guilty. So in the first place, how is this helping the company by making consumers feel that there is guilt in consuming meat?
Sure. So let me just go back to that. So Raji, what part of that question do you want to address right now?
So I think the contradiction is he's asking if it is right to target consumers, is it right to convey that there is guilt in consuming meat? Because
like we said, that because it's such an early stage and you've got so many, aspects and sub-aspects, there is guilt in consuming meat. Like I unfortunately don't drink a lot of booze, but I've still been diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver. And the doctors told me that you've got to give up meat. Now I grew up in Goa, meat is like my life. But every time that I look at bacon, my mind is telling me that, wow, go for it. But in my heart, I'm like, ouch, there's guilt associated with it. So yeah, technically that makes sense. However, is that message the only thing that is going to be enough to drive behavior change? I'm not too sure.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I also just wanted to add that, like you said, vegetarians. So we are basically catering to vegetarians who also eat meat. And also in India, we have a lot of people who don't consume on a particular day, or also there's a segment who feel guilty of consuming. So I think from a marketing point of time, I think one needs to study the entire landscape and target for specific occasions and specific mindsets. So therefore, I think, it's okay to look into those small pieces of segments which are low-hanging fruits, or which are the target segments in the short run.
Just the other thing there, Raji, and from your FMCG experience, you'll agree that a lot of brands, things like Magnum or Cadbury, when they started, it was all occasion-based marketing, for the really special moments and, when you do this. And after a long period of time, they actually had to do many more campaigns to ensure that this becomes an everyday product.
Sure.
We have an opportunity today to actually not do that same thing. So it would be wise to not anchor your brand to specific occasions, which is on the days when you want meat but can't have it, because you're queuing that, oh, you're only supposed to have this on those days. If you use a larger association, it's easier for brand building.
Sure. Yeah. So the next question is, why not for non-vegetarians who have stopped eating meat?
So it's an obvious one, right? Like those people will find the brands on their own. I mean, they're actively looking and you can obviously market to them. But is that segment large enough do you really need to spend hard-earned money on marketing to a segment which anyways will be early adopters? You'll have to evaluate all of those answers. But from a branding perspective, there's no reason to not target that group. But again, that's a demographic. It's not a mindset. So my urge would be think mindset and less demographic.
Yeah. Also, I think from our quant research, what we've seen is typically the early adopters are like high in consumption of meat. So they are having meat almost like on a daily basis. So for them also, I think they're looking for options where, if not like stop completely, but also options where they can like reduce their consumption. So typically what we're calling as a flexitarian segments right now. So let me move on to the next question.
Sorry, Raji, could I just add something here?
Sure, Varun. Yeah.
Okay, you can hear me well, right? There's no echo and all that?
No, we can hear you well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, I just wanted to, by the way, thanks Chitresh and thanks everyone else for being here as well. Just wanted to add one point here, which is that what we are seeing in the early adopter market, which once again, the early adopter market is young, upwardly mobile, those various personas that Chitresh has mentioned. And Raji also just mentioned that they're regularly consuming meat. There is this underlying guilt of eating meat that's already there, right? So for various reasons, whatever those happen to be, whether that's guilt about health, guilt about the planet, guilt about animal welfare, etc., that underlying guilt already exists to a certain degree. So what this actually offers is an opportunity to address that. But what you can do within that broader canvas is what Chitresh has outlined here, which is take a look at specific messages, take a look at specific occasions, or you can go big and bold and not even look at those specific occasions. It really depends on what you're seeing from your consumers, what you're seeing in terms of how you evaluate. But certainly the data and what we have evaluated thus far definitely shows us that there is this simultaneous guilt, but also a desire to have the taste of meat, the indulgence of meat. So marrying those two things together actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Varun. So the next question, Chitresh, is which is a better proposition to offer? Application specifics like burgers or samosas or nuggets, which is more occasion specific, or a ready-to-cook version to allow people to cook the way they want?
So I think, Raji, with your data that you have, this might come from that, but we worked with Jubilant Foods, we worked with different categories. Both of them have a role to play. So it's not that, oh, let me only make a ready to cook product, which, you can use in various ways, and let me not make chicken nuggets. When we are saying that you can use those occasions and you can use those things, is to pick up what are the cues that people are craving at that occasion, and then can I build from that? So samosas, burgers, chicken nuggets, all of this, obviously there's a demand for it, right? That's why people love it. And there's a demand for ready to cook also. But within both of them, how are you going to pitch it? That's what is more important. That's what we keep coming back to.
Sure. Also, I think across the world, what we've seen is mostly the products which the consumers are very familiar with. Those have, I think, better resonance because you are able to identify well with those products. Like typically in the US, we've seen a lot of burger launches or like even the nuggets or tenders, etc. I think in India also we have to go the same route where we have to replicate the familiar formats. So which includes right from the main course meals to the ones that we've spoken about, which is like burgers, samosas, nuggets. But as you mentioned, yes, it depends on each and every occasion that we're creating for. And we do see a success happening like for both the formats.
I think Kirti had another question earlier, which we may have missed, but...
yeah. So how easy or difficult is it to pivot my branding strategy midway?
So let's go back to the definition of branding strategy. Your brand, when you define it, the definition of what your brand stands for should not change for at least 5 years or 6 years. Because your strategy, what my brand stands for, doesn't change based on the realities of, things happening in society. Communication strategy changes. So Nike for generations has told people that there's an athlete inside each of us. Big, small, fat, thin, whatever color, gender, etc. There's an athlete inside you. Go in and untap the potential that you have. The messaging that happens as a response to what's happening in society. So is it difficult? Yes. Should you be doing it? Ideally, no. But if you've not publicly launched anything, if you're doing things internally, and if you just put the product in the market just to see product market fit, it's a good stage to evaluate your strategy and decide that what should change when you start investing money behind it.
The next question is, so this is again, we've not gone to the small towns because right now most of the early adopters are typically in urban areas. But there is a question saying, do you think there will be success when we go to the lower tier of cities or like complex middle income groups and suburban India?
So it would be unfair for me to actually give an answer for this based on the research because we didn't go to those towns. But based on the learnings that we've got from other categories, because of the whole digital adoption and the exposure that people have on different platforms now, look up the data on Dalgona coffee and how that trend was trending in different tier 2, tier 3 towns. People will adopt things very, very quickly because of the exposure that's there now. And the second thing is, Varun can talk more about this, but in the early stages, there was a lot of data that we had about, cold storage, access to meats, hygienic things, the offerings that you have in meat beyond just freshwater fish and things like that. If you can actually fill in those gaps, there is no reason that people in smaller towns will not adopt quickly to this offering.
So I think actually I did want to add a little bit here. Most of what we focused on as GFI India and the community generally has been to define this early adopter market. And again, as Raji has said and Chitresh has said, most of that early adopter market is concentrated in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, right? It's about, let's say 50, 70 million people in the tier 1 and tier 2 cities. And by the way, 50 to 70 million people sounds like a lot. I mean, it's like, 10, 15 times the population of Singapore. But the problem obviously is that they're spread out across many cities and infrastructure is a challenge, etc. But the main question is, which is this question, I think the principal question for our sector is beyond that early adopter market, which anyways is a challenge to penetrate, right? We're still very early stage. How can we truly scale to the actual mass market of India? Because people keep saying 1.3 billion people, etc. Or in this case, if 60% of those people are eating non-veg, then about, let's say 800 million people. How do we actually scale to that? And that I think is a question that we have to continue to evaluate. I think that there are approaches that are being taken now by entrepreneurs. Like one of the next questions is about celebrities, etc., which can help us unlock that true mass market. And then there are also other kind of infrastructure and distribution things that need to be figured out, right? So for instance, we worked with Swiggy Instamart to help them create a specific button for plant-based meat on their meat on their meat section in the app. And Swiggy Instamart distributes to about 18 different cities, and they have huge distribution. They do about 12 million orders a day across all different grocery types. So these are the things that will happen over the next few years beyond this early adopter market, and we'll certainly be doing more deep dives into that true mass market as well. But at the top level, what we can say is that it will probably be even more unforgiving in terms of taste and price, and of course access. The reason being that people in the true mass market don't necessarily have the same drivers in terms of thinking about planetary health, etc. Right? So the considerations there that we can borrow from other industries are, if we're talking, for instance, about an urban slum, one of the important results that has happened from previous food studies that are not smart protein related, but just general food studies, is that oftentimes people are looking to buy snacks or food items with just the change that's in their pocket. So bringing the cost of items down to even coinage, like 10 rupee coins, 20 rupee coins now, might be really important. And we've seen this in other industries, whether it's shampoos or even soya nuggets, etc. We've heard from other companies, the likes of Unilever and a lot of different MNCs, that bringing down the size of a pack so that it can be bought with the change that's in one consumer's pocket is a big deal for someone who's buying in an urban slum, right? So these are the things that will come up when we think about the true mass market across the length and breadth of the country at every socioeconomic level. But right now, I think we still have a lot of work to do to saturate or capture the early adopter market in the first place.
Yeah. And just to add one thing to that, Varun, and everybody else, the needs, the emotional drivers will actually be more or less different for sure. But in terms of the needs, there are small things that we untapped when you're doing some other research for another brand, is that a lot of times people can't afford, smaller areas and with lesser income levels to buy a lot of meat that's enough for the full family. But they do want to have meat because it's social currency, right? So Sundays, if there are people at home, I have to serve chicken. It's a great opportunity to have a smaller pack at a lower price point to say, add it along with the chicken in a biryani to increase the sense of meat in the dish. And, it'll be great for everybody. So there are a lot of things that can be done, which are complementary to your strategy for tier 1, tier 2 towns. But like Varun said, it'll need a lot more efforts to change behavior mindsets there, and taste price point is going to be super critical.
Exactly. Do we have time for more questions, Nicole? Or
Yeah, let's take a couple more.
Sure. So Chitresh, the next question is about celebrity influence. So how much can these things actually change consumer behavior?
So the short answer, they do. For the longest time, chlorophyll was of the opinion that celebrities do not really change behavior and brands don't need them. But the answer came to us when we looked at different categories. Like we were doing an innovate brand. We work with indigo paints. In categories like those, where there is a sales channel, there are tier 2 towns, you've got sales agents who need credibility. Celebrities give you instant credibility. And in a category like ours, where there's no conversation about plant-based meats or alternatives, if you've suddenly got Virat and Anushka on Instagram talking about something, you've got massive reach and awareness. However, is it enough to change behavior? Maybe, may not be. Like, I'm not going to start eating something just because Virat told me to eat it. There are different drivers there. But yes, at this stage of the category, celebrities are good friends to have, at least to drive trials and to get people aware about the brand.
Completely. I think it has been massive creation of awareness to start with.
Yeah.
So the next question is, what do you think is the reason for the F&B industry in India to not adopt to huge innovation in the PBM sector, plant-based meat sector? Do you think there are not enough transition agents or organizations? So Varun, do you want to take that?
Yeah. I mean, look, we've over the last few years, we've worked with about, I would say, I think 54 of India's and the world's largest food, agri, biotech corporations across the supply chain, right? So I'm including manufacturing players, ingredient players, etc. The question is specifically related to F&B in India, right? So F&B meaning people who are either in food service and distribution, like Jubilant, which runs Domino's in South Asia, and other things also, right? Popeyes, Dunkin' Donuts, etc. Or it could even mean FMCG companies like ITC or Marico, etc. Right? So we've seen some progress, right? So we've seen Jubilant Group, that is Domino's, launch a unthinkable plant protein pizza, as well as invest in Mr. Veg Foods. And we've also seen, of course, ITC launch plant-based meat products, right? And so we've worked for a long time with all of these companies to think through their branding, their product positioning, their portfolio, all of these things. And we're confident it'll grow a little bit more as well over time. But definitely, as the ecosystem and landscape has evolved globally, with startup companies that are actually driving the action first and foremost, and then pulling in the large companies into the space, that's how it's going to evolve in India as well. So I think there's going to be a lot more action and a lot more growth in the startup landscape, and several of those people are actually on this call in the audience today. I can just call out Blue Tribe Foods, Shakahari, etc. are here. they're going to continue to grow and I think pull the FMCG players in, either in terms of investment in companies like this or launching more of their own lines. So I remain optimistic, but the underlying, I guess, context for all of this is that F&B in India can be a little more conservative than in other parts of the world, where a lot of the innovation is in distribution, cost reduction, etc., rather than in launching revolutionary new product categories. So this is just, I think, an underlying truth that we have to contend with, but I remain optimistic.
Thank you, Varun. I think there's an interesting question which says, when we say create for India, vegetarians who eat meat, where should we place the product? Should we keep them in the veg freezer or the non-veg freezer? And which would be more impactful? I think I can take this one. So from all the studies that we've done, so we do know that it is a lot more effective when you place the products next to the non-veg products. So typically, since the target consumer is the non-vegetarian who buys both products, so when he's going to shop for the non-veg products, it's ideal to have it in the next shelf so that they can buy both. And we've also seen most of the consumers who buy it, they're also the dual usage consumers. So they are also eating animal-based products, and they are also like experimenting with the plant-based products. And this has been proven across multiple markets, especially in the developed countries like US, Europe also.
I just put a resource in the chat that should help with this. So just to reinforce Raji's point, the technical term for this is an integrated segregated set. So the idea being that it is integrated in the meat space, the meat aisle or whatever it is, but it is segregated. So it's next to it, but it's slightly separate from it to make clear the distinction between a plant-based meat and a conventional animal slaughtered meat, right? So just because we're saying essentially that we happen to be, mostly vegetarian relative to the rest of the world in terms of how much meat we're eating per capita, that doesn't mean that the people who are looking to buy meat wouldn't be searching for it in the meat space, right? They would still be searching for it in the meat section. So that's still the best place to put it. And we're seeing that reinforced not just in these developed markets like the US, Australia, etc., but also for Indian retailers. Just putting out, a couple of plugs here. Folks like Namdharis in Bangalore have been really, really good partners to work with on some of this. Even Nature's Basket, all of these folks are I think, showing the way in terms of best practices that we've worked with them on. So if you go to Nature's Basket now across the country, you'll see that there is signage that shows a few shelves of plant-based meat in their frozen meat section or in their chilled meat section. So I mean, there's a lot of work still to do, I think, to evaluate all of this, but the early signs point towards these best practices as they have evolved in places like the US. So please do check out that article I just posted in the chat, or that page I just posted in the chat.
Great, thank you, Varun. So Chitresh, this is for you. As a startup, when should I hire a professional brand head?
That's a difficult question, as long as you're able to define the brand, and if you can just talk to people, ask for advice from people, at GFI or whatever community you have, that's where you will have to take that decision, because getting in a brand head or a marketing head, it's not just life stage, right? It's about the money investment. It's about what is your go-to-market strategy? When are you looking at raising funds? Are you going to go in for an ad campaign? Is there an agency that needs to be managed? So it's a difficult answer, but I would say as the founder, if you yourself can invest enough time and energy with guidance from somebody in defining the brand and the key brand aspects, that would be fundamental, for the early stages, rather than going in and getting a brand head who you entrust to say that, you define my brand.
Sure. Thank you, Chitresh. So Nicole, should we take more or are we?
I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
But thank you, Chitresh, so much for your time this evening. Thank you, Raji. Thank you, Hussain. I just want to remind everyone in the audience that this is part of a larger study that the consumer insights team has conducted with chlorophyll. You will gain access to those resources in a couple of weeks. We will email everyone with a link to the resource once it has been published. So watch out for that. Once again, just plugging the GF Ideas India community. We plan on hosting many more events over the coming year. So stay tuned for those. And if you have any additional questions that haven't been answered, please feel free to write to us, and we will write back to you and share any insights that we have. Once again, thank you so much to Chitresh for sharing, for all your time over the last couple of years, but also sharing your insights on the panel this evening. Thank you, Raji. Thank you, Hussain. Last pointer, once the webinar shuts down, we will be sharing a survey. So I would request all the attendees to give us 5 minutes of your time by just responding to that survey. It's so that we can create more webinars that are useful to you with insights that would support you in building your ventures within the sector. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Nicole. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.